afternoon. Welcome to Desperado LGBTQ Film Festival's discussion with the director and participants of the documentary Invisible, a story about the singers and songwriters who have made Nashville what it is today, even though they are not recognized as such. We are joined by director TJ Parsell, Dianne Davidson, Cidney, and the Desperado LGBTQ film programmer, Alan East. I'd like to thank you all for taking your time out of your day to meet with me. My name is Ben Cahlamer. I'm a film director, not a film director, I don't direct. I may orchestrate, but I don't direct. I'm a film critic and based in Phoenix, Arizona. I'd personally like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us, especially Cidney, who is conveniently parked outside of a McDonald's somewhere on his way down to Florida. And I want to first start by congratulating all of you and thanking all of you for making this powerful documentary. Without it, I don't know that the call to action that the documentary presents would be as well known. And I really hope that this reaches a very wide audience because, the number of singers who have taken your lyrics and your words and or on your own have taken those words and put a voice behind them. And I was listening to the music pieces throughout the documentary, and I was just impressed with the number of songs that I knew, the number of artists that I knew, and impressed. I'm probably going to run that word into the ground, for lack of a better phrase. But TJ, I'd like to start with you. What was the impetus for your wanting to tell this particular story and at this particular time?
Well, thank you, Ben, for having me, and thank the Desperado Film Festival for showing our film and giving it love. We much appreciate that. This has truly been a labor of love. And when you make a film, you never know if it's going to get seen. And, so it means a great deal to us that you guys programmed us. So thank you. Yeah, I had just moved to Nashville when a friend of mine called me up and he said, TJ, you want to have coffee? I've got this great idea for a film. And I thought, sure. Bill was in the stained glass business, and I thought everybody's got an idea. What do you got? And he said, gay women in country music. There's this entire network of gay women songwriters who collectively have written for everybody. And many of them are my friends. And I just looked at Bill and I thought, wow, what a fascinating topic. Not just because of the body of work that these women had produced, but what was that like for them in terms of trying to navigate this industry that is very male dominated, very not very welcoming to anybody who's different. So, here was a group of women who, and one trans man who were able to make a indelible impact on the music industry. And yet they had to navigate who they were and their sexuality in this environment where, I think a lot of what is at the heart and core of their best work is when they are being as authentic and as vulnerable as they could be. So I found those competing things really fascinating. And I think that was the driving focus of the film for us.
Thank you. We're also joined by Bonnie Baker. I'd like to say hi and welcome you to our discussion. It was interesting, Bonnie, I think it was your opening scene that TJ used set in a church with a piano. And, I grew up as a Catholic, and I've been confirmed, I've been baptized. I almost said I was excommunicated, but I'm really not excommunicated. I think I excommunicated myself when I went to college. But there's always a special place for religion and for the music that fills a church or a mass and a celebration of life. And I'm fond of the piano. I never learned to play it, but I want to thank you for that beautiful opening piece. It really resonated with me as I began this hour and 46-minute journey. What could you share your background, and could you share why participating in this documentary was of such great importance to you beyond the social messaging that lesbian women in country music is not something that's in the general vernacular?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me, Ben and Alan. I really appreciate it. I do think religion and the misuse of religion has been a very big part of many of our lives. It's almost used as a tool against us, whereas spirituality is more about who you are. And I think the opening, that was totally TJ's idea to and it's actually a studio that was an old church that has been bought, turned into a studio. It's one of the only floors in Nashville that's big enough for an orchestra. So they do a lot of orchestral pieces there. But the piano is just absolutely one of my favorite, and favorite things to hear. And to take the idea of sitting in a church with the stained glass, playing music that is absolutely a representation of who I am as a human, even though my father, as a Southern Baptist preacher, I wasn't excommunicated, but I certainly was not welcome. And I did like you, I excommunicated myself, because the life that I was living was a lie, and it was suffocating. And for many years, I thought I couldn't really be a part of a faith or a religion, because religion, faith, and spirituality were all tied together. And when I was able to pull away from that, and it's so funny, I'm gonna get weepy just talking about it. For years, I wouldn't play the hymns because I hated the way church made me feel. But I realized it wasn't the hymns that made me feel that way. It was the people in the church that had a very narrow vision of God. So a lot of forgiveness, a lot of therapy, and years ago, a lot of whiskey got me to a point that I was able to kind of pull myself away and realize there is a difference between religion and spirituality. And that music totally comes from a place of spirituality. Religion has nothing to do with music. Religion is rules and punishment and black and white. There is no beautiful, messy middle with religion. And if you study the history of mankind, religion has done more damage to us as humans than any other thing in the world. You know, the holy wars that we've been a part of, and I feel like we're going through right now, is if you don't believe the way I believe, then you've got to be exterminated. And spirituality doesn't speak that way. Music brings us to a place of wanting a closer walk with the universe, with God, or with the spiritual life that we want to have. You sit down to a piano, which is wood and strings and hammers hitting strings, and that is the most spiritual thing that you can ever do in your life. It has nothing to do with religion. So the freedom this film really has brought to my life is the being able to separate myself out and like you said, excommunicate myself from the rules and regulations, the black and white, you're going to go to hell, the no mercy, into this place of love and perfect creation. I believe sincerely that we were created to create.
That's beautiful.
We are creations, and we are put here to create. And so, man, that opening scene and just the whole idea was TJ wanting to bring in the church, and inside this church was this imperfect person playing music, So thank you for that question. It's an amazing part of the film that I think is a through line. You see it with many of us, that the religion versus our families and our spiritual walk are two separate things. And I love how it's kind of really shown in a picture in those scenes.
I would agree. One thing that I think surprised me, although it probably shouldn't, was toward the end of the documentary, I believe you were reflecting on your family with your parents and how you felt. And if I'm misreading, please let me know. You felt trapped, and that led you on your journey and your path to where you are now. But I was surprised by the number of rules that basically encompassed who you were. You didn't have any freedom to express yourself, and and to TJ as well. That really tied back into the beginning of the film, where yes, I think we are all imperfect in some way, shape, or form. But even within that imperfection was that beautiful piece of music in that beautiful church with the amazing piano, and such a gifted musician was at the helm of the piano telling a story. So I'm glad I'm able to share this journey with all of you, and in particular that experience that you offered to the audience and TJ through your documentary.
Thank you guys both. The way that you just described the film, I think is the most gorgeous description of it I've heard yet.
I was going to say, I'd love to have that written down. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, we're recording it. I'll try and get you a transcript, but I can't remember what I just said, so it might be a while.
I think that's why we all use lots of paper and lots of recording devices, because so many times I'll think, what a great idea. Wait, what was that? That fast it goes, so.
Dianne, I also want to thank you for sharing your journey on this documentary. I think yours was, they're all visible to a certain extent, but I think because of your lovely personality and your effervescence and the beauty of who you are, it came through loud and clear in the documentary. And I especially appreciated how you shared the story of your son and his journey. And it's so amazing that with everything that you do, with all of the trials and tribulations that you've gone through in your life, that you are able to take those lessons and share it with the next generation. And could you share? I know the documentary, you speak to quite a bit of it in the documentary, but could you share your life experience with what led you to eventually wanting to, if I remember correctly, adopt a son to begin with? I got the sense that the decision came down to time being a precious commodity.
Yes.
And you'd had so much time before with heartache and heartbreak, and sharing your music with the world, only to be pushed aside by an industry that just simply doesn't want to recognize A, women in general, and B, LGBTQ artists and performers. So thank you. And can I ask you to share your life experience?
Share my life experience. Wow. What time is it? Well, I guess my story's a little bit different from some of the others because, for one thing, the religious thing, I grew up kind of in the Methodist church, where it's like, try not to do bad stuff and we'll see you at the potluck. I mean, it's, to be a good Methodist, you have to have, great casserole dishes. And it's just, I sort of left the church. My dad kind of left the church because they pissed him off, wanting more money, and he stopped going. And then it reached a point where they didn't want to let me wear my jeans to church. So I just said, okay, I'm not going to go anymore. And my parents, I think, kind of gave up trying to control me like really early in my life, because I don't recall them saying, oh, you have to go to church. So thankfully, I didn't have that part. And I also had a really supportive family. So early on, I knew that I wanted to have kids. There's a real brief, quick, I'll make it as quick as possible. When I was 5 years old, my family was in New York, and we wound up going on the game show Beat the Clock. And we were on there for a week. My parents were so good at it. And we got like a whole truckload of stuff, sent to our house with all these prizes and stuff. But even then, and there are 78s of it, which I've got to get back from TJ, where I believe in that show, they said, what are you going to, what do you want to do, Diane? I said, well, I expect to have 8 to 10 children. And at the time, I was referring to my boyfriend, Stevie Butterworth, and I think he was so shocked by the time I got home. I'm pretty sure we broke up, but he was already 7, so he was an older man. And so I knew I wanted to have kids my whole life. I mean, obviously my whole life.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any question. But, I reached a point where I knew that I needed to honor that part of myself that was primarily attracted to women, sexually and romantically, emotionally, and that I was not going to be dishonest about that, and certainly not dishonest enough to marry some, poor guy that didn't know it and do all that stuff. So in the early days, it just wasn't an option. You just didn't do it. And then later on, I had a gay male friend, and we talked a while about having a child. But honestly, I didn't have insurance. I was a musician. I was on the road. I was barely making it anyway. And this was before I took my corporate job. So I decided not to do that, not to have a child. So then I thought, well, I want to adopt. But then I went, blah, 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 blah. So I reached a point, and I was 50, I guess. And I said, I can't have this life be where I don't have that child in my life. And so I started the process, and it was not for the faint of heart. And it took oddly enough, it took just about, it turns out, from the time he was born until I got him, which was about 18 months.
Wow.
And, once I got that little, squirrely little tiny baby, it was all over. My heart was right there. He grabbed onto it, and it has not changed since then. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be his mom. And it's the best job I've ever had, and the hardest.
I can imagine. I don't have kids of my own. I was a kid, and I'm sure if you asked my parents, they'd probably tell you it was a difficult job raising me. But as I said before we got on camera, to all of you, your passion, your drive, your desire to be recognized in an industry that doesn't want to take the time or the money to do that.
Right.
It's just so impressive, the power that you have with a written word to share your life and to have that heard by millions, even without the recognition, is just impressive. Sid, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I think out of all of the participants, and if I'm speaking this out of turn, please let me know. I think out of all of the participants, you had the most visible arc in terms of life. You went from you transitioned, excuse me, from female to male, and you were gorgeous either way. But I'm happy to know you and to share this time with you. You had a family prior to your transition, and now you have grandkids after your transition. What the love that you shared on camera was so impressive, and I don't doubt that that didn't change as a result of your transition. But did you find, I think the documentary speaks to this, but did you find any more freedom once you had transitioned as it relates to how you relate to your kids and to your grandkids? And did that change your relationships with any of them?
Great question, and thank you for having me, both Alan and Ben and us. And boy, what beautiful questions and descriptions from everybody. I'm fascinated by all the answers. And I loved, but before I answer that, I just want to say, Bonnie, the phrase, the beautiful messy middle, will stick with me, because I think that's where we all have been, all of us, in the beautiful messy middle of whatever framework we live in. And I love that. And you almost made me cry, Ben, there for a minute. I feel like I'm welling up, because I am so fortunate. And I did, Dianne, marry a gay man. So I married him, though. That was the problem. Instead of just.
But you got your kids. See, that's the thing. You got your kids. So it was the perfect thing to do.
I got my kids, and even after losing my beautiful daughter, Jessie, to cancer, my daughter Reed has 4 beautiful grandchildren. And let me answer the question about the love and the changing, and did it affect my relationship? Not with my grandchildren. I mean, my 2 older grandchildren, the 2 granddaughters, knew me as Rara, as a grandmother when they were tiny and little, and they know that I've transitioned, and they're all fine. They ask me questions about it all the time with all the new vernacular, the dead name, and what, does it bother you if somebody dead names you Rara? I'm like, they know all this stuff. My 2 grandsons know me as Rara, their, I don't know, grandfather, grandparent, I'd like to say. My daughter, who is now 39 years old, was completely and totally supportive. In fact, without her support, when I had kind of this realization, really, that I could transition, because it wasn't in my head. I mean, I knew I was trans from the time I was 4, and of course there was no word for it then. Transgender did not exist, that word, until the 80s. But I knew that I was a boy in a girl's body when I was little anyway, and grew up. But I put it aside. A couple of moments in my life, I looked at kind of what was going on in that realm, but kind of just said, I'm me, I'm an androgynous woman, and that's the way it's going to be. But when I had that kind of moment of clarity, if you will, that, oh my gosh, I can do this. And I had no responsibilities at the time. My daughter was married, had kids. I wasn't in a relationship for years. Nobody, I mean, obviously it affects people, but I wasn't personally responsible at that moment. And the first person I called when I had this kind of realization was my daughter. And we got together that minute, and she lived across the street, and she said, "Mom," which she still calls me, "Mom, you have to do something." And so if I had had her support, I wouldn't have gone ahead. Of course, it took a year or more for the whole thing to kind of come together, my transition. But then after I started physically changing, she had a really hard time. And this is the story that I don't tell, that is not in the movie, that is hard, is that she had a really hard time when I started transitioning. Because if you think of it from her point of view, she lost her mother,
Right.
as I was. And she's back around now and everything's fine. But she had a period of about a year and a half where she really was affected by my transition. And that was difficult for not only her, but for me.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of complications. But the movie and what TJ brought out in my life is that arc.
Yep.
That however long it is, 7 minutes or 8 minutes of me in the movie, just brilliantly puts together the arc of my life. And I am fortunate. I know as a trans person that I am one of the fortunate ones, because there are many trans people who don't have support. They don't have the financial means to transition. They don't have any community that they can call on, and they have the church or their parents or their community not supporting them. And it is deadly, to be honest. It's a deadly place to be. So I'm fortunate, and what TJ shows in the film is the truth. I am loved, and I love, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you. I want to open this next question up to the floor. COVID has affected all of us in some way, shape, or form. And what was already a monumentally difficult task in getting your work in front of the right people in order to be heard was made doubly difficult. Dianne, you and I were talking about this off camera. How has COVID either negatively impacted or improved your lives coming out of the pandemic? Not that we're completely out of it, but we're probably hopefully over the hurdle where you can go back to performing or go back to doing what you were doing, hopefully prior to the pandemic. But how did it impact you, either positively or negatively?
I'd like to jump in on this one because I do have an experience I'd like to share. It's been financially challenging for me for a while now. I went through a very difficult relationship breakup, and I had to work hard to be able to move back home to Nashville. So I kind of started off under the mark. And then when COVID hit, everything stopped and all the income stopped. And I was a little bit panicked because, as I told a friend, I can live in a cardboard box, but I have a son and I'm not going to have his life disrupted that way. Right. The positive that's come out of it is that I have had quite a number of fans and supporters that have financially helped us through this time and have gotten us through it in a way that we would not have been able to get through it And so the positive for me is to feel that love and support, and to know these are people that I really didn't know as friends for the most part. But that what I was doing was powerful enough and strong enough to touch people in a way that they were willing to share what resources they had with us to help us get through this time. So I have to take the positive from it and know that that's as meaningful to me as anything that's ever happened to me. And they're still doing it. Sometimes they'll check in. You need grocery money? You need, because they know I have a 16-year-old that's like a Hoover vacuum in the kitchen. And, they're so good to me, and it means so much to me. So, and plus, just to say again, just the love and support of this family that we have in Invisible is just, it's one of the most meaningful periods of my life because a lot of reasons, but a lot of the reason is because of this family that I've been able to become a member of.
That's
Pardon me for sticking that "of" out there, but anyway. So
that's amazing. Bonnie or Sid?
Go ahead. COVID's been a difficult time for me. I had quite a few things happening, a new record that was about to be released. I was auditioning for the lead in what could have been a Broadway show. Believe it or not, they were looking for an old trans man who could sing, so there aren't that many of us around. But I was going to do a TED talk, and there was a whole bunch of stuff happening, and then I had gigs ready to do, and like everybody else, and we're not alone. Nothing that we say this is not an individual problem. It just went boom. That was it. And but what did come out of it, of course, for me, let me just back up a second and say that if I can, TJ, mention the gender line, because TJ took my part in Invisible and extended it a little bit and put out a documentary short called The Gender Line, which he and I were in 2019 and 20, we went to a whole bunch of film festivals, and that carried me even after the pandemic, knowing that was happening. And then, as hard as it was to know that Invisible was not going to, that 2020 was going to just postpone us a little bit, it was still something to look forward to. And so this, as Dianne and everyone has said, this whole project has been a great gift to us, and we have become a family. And the other thing I did in the dead of fall and winter of 2020, and I, in all my bleakness and blackness, I started writing my memoir, and I got a book deal. So
awesome.
So we make lemonade out of lemons, and that seems to be the attitude of every single person in this film.
we make lemonade even when there are no lemons.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the spirit, and I keep reflecting back to all of these people, all of them, and I mean not just the cast, but the crew and the Bill Brim who have the idea, and TJ, of course, as director, brilliant, and I love you madly. And the spirit, the heart, the soul of each person in and about and of this film is extraordinary. And we keep saying it, but it's true. We have become a family, and we will stay a family.
And one of the interesting things when you mention that part about the heart and the people that are involved in the film, I think back to when we were at Linda Ronstadt's apartment and the crew was there, and Linda was being interviewed, or was singing or talking or whatever we were doing, and the crew was, I'm so sorry, the crew was actually weeping. They were so touched by it, and having that energy coming from them was another piece of it, that you don't see that in the film. You don't see that energy coming from them, but it's certainly there. It's the feeling is there, and everybody that's been involved with it along the way, all of the sound people and the camera people, every one of them, I feel like, even if they weren't involved for very long, I still feel so close to all of them because they put their hearts and souls into it too.
Thank you. Bonnie?
You're muted,
Bud.
I did that so I wouldn't be noisy. I think what's meant for us will not miss us. And 2020 put that to the test for me, because I knew how hard TJ had worked on this film. And I remember the feeling after Belcourt, which we showed it in town, to kind of show our circles of people what had been working on, what we all had been working on for a couple of years. And the feeling that we all had that night, it was such a glorious, victory. And Emmy Lou put her arms around me, and so I had just out of body experience, like standing there talking to her about songwriting and everything. To go from that to we have a worldwide pandemic was a feeling I don't know that I can ever describe, because it's just like, it's like that wasn't on my bingo card of like things that could happen, right? But what has become fact for me is what is meant for us will not miss us.
Right.
And the work has been put into the film. The waiting has happened. And now the timing feels right to me. I know I've had that conversation with TJ. When art meets timing, there's something very magical happens, and it feels to me like we were just supposed to wait till 2021, and I don't know why. And one of the good things out of 2020 is the fact that we're doing this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was something we had never done before. And art is not US or Brazil. Art is not just UK. It is the world. And right now in the world, we can all sit in a conversation like this, and that did not exist before 2020. So I'm going to take the good parts of it. And yes, I have an 18-year-old, and they did junior and senior year sitting in their room. And I will never understand, but we all got out of it okay. They're healthy and happy and off into college. And I prayed every day, please don't let my kid get bogged down in whatever this is, because it was deep and dark. He had 2 friends try to commit suicide during 2020. And it wasn't just his friends, it was worldwide, right? And every day I was like, talk about a spiritual walk. I had to say, please, dear universe, God, whoever you are, let us be healthy and happy and in our bubble. So 2020 tested my faith in a way that has never been tested, but on the other side of it, and I'm like you, Ben, I don't know that we're all the way out of it, but I do feel a little relief that we're getting through it. We're learning, we're resilient. And that's the last thing that I want to say. All of us sitting here are resilient. And the fact that we can be resilient together and tell the story and then wait for it to have the perfect timing just feels very right to me, even though 2020 was like, let's don't ever do that again.
Right.
So
An interesting part of that, it made me think of one thing that I want to say is that the feeling that I had, and I speak to it in the film where I say I was right there and then it was gone. It felt the same way with the film. We were right there and then the door slammed with COVID. And I think, I think TJ experienced what so many of us had experienced. And so, if anything, I think it helped him understand what it was like for us, although you'd had plenty of experiences in your life to be able to relate to us. But I think just that thing of we're not going to give up. We've never given up before, so we're not going to give up this time either. Right. And we're going to keep after it. We're going to stay strong. And as hard as it was at times, because we all have big feelings and we all get upset about things, and we get depressed or we get frustrated, and just having the family there to be able to say that's going to be okay. We've been through worse actually, so we're going to be fine. And I think for TJ, I'm really proud of him that he's managed to get through it and be right back into the joy and exuberance of being able to share this film with the world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
TJ, before I turn it over to you, I want to make two comments. The first is that I had the ironic pleasure of watching your film on National Coming Out Day. And what better message to share with the world on National Coming Out Day than your film? So thank you. The other thing that I want to say, and I think it's a common theme out of all of the comments that have been shared today, is a message of hope. And your documentary leaves us with that message that there is hope for a better world, for better things to come. But the other thing is that all six of us on this call, we are human. And I think sometimes we forget that we are human first and emotions second, or vice versa. And the heart and the soul that has been poured into this project and what's come out of it is beyond words. And I'm welling up because it's just such a genuinely pure experience that I want to thank you for sharing it with the world. And I don't know if this is the right way to say it. I'm thankful that you got to share this film in 2021 instead of 2020. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And it's such a brilliant moment. What parting words would you like to leave with us for the closing of this conversation?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that, and to everybody in the cast and your kind comments. It's funny. I was poised to do the very same quote that Dianne did, where she said, "I felt like it was right there, and then it was gone," and that's what 2020 felt like. And it was a lot of being curled up in a fetal position and just waiting for it to pass. And it was hard because people were dying and people were food insecure, and there was so much going on around the world. So it was kind of, it just wasn't appropriate to feel sorry for myself. So, I went and worked on my golf game.
With a mask, right?
With a mask, indeed. Yes. But what I want to say is that, and I think Mary Gaucher puts it the most succinctly in the film. She said, for a song to be any good, it has to be vulnerable. And at the very core, we're all the same. And the thing that I was so struck with by these women and Cidney is that they were willing to bust open their chests and reveal to all of us who they are. And when somebody does that on such a deep, honest level, we see ourselves. We see that we're all the same. And we're connected. And working on this film with these incredible artists who, in spite of all these forces that from childhood that conspired to keep them from stepping into their artistry, from stepping into who they are, they did it anyhow. and they persevered anyhow, and they've made an impact on every single one of us. And they've certainly made an impact on me. My life has changed from having worked with them over these last couple of years. And I echo what Dianne said. I feel so privileged to be among this family of artists. And I had fallen in love with every one of them. And my highest hope was that you in the audience would feel the same by the time we get done with the film. And
I certainly did. I certainly did. Well, I want to thank all of you and thank Alan for programming the film and for being able to share it with the world.
Alan, did you want to say anything, dear?
I know. I'm just sitting here watching everybody listen to everything. I just wanted to say thanks for being part of our festival. It was such a great film. I rewatched it last night just to refamiliarize myself with it, and the music is just so amazing. I got a Spotify playlist with everybody on it now, so and some of the music, I'll tell you, I didn't know about, so it's just great to be able to learn some of this music from country, from Nashville, and I can enjoy it. And thanks for writing it, thanks for performing it, thanks for putting it out there. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us at the festival, and thank you for having us today on this this Q&A, this interaction that we've had. It's always important, and I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. And I wanted to say I have an 18-year-old too, and yeah, it was brutal.
yeah. The staying at home at the computer, and did you get your? I mean, I finally wound up sending him back to school because we were going to kill each other, and I thought, it's okay. Maybe we'll die of COVID, but if we keep doing this, somebody's going to die.
Right, I get that. Absolutely, yeah. It was a tough year and a half, 2 years, I guess, really. So, I'm happy that it's kind of winding down for sure.
Thank you again, all, very, very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Sharing your stories.
Thanks for having us.
Safe drives, and good luck. I have a Kia, by the way, so you're in good hands.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Be careful, Sid.
Yeah,
Thanks.
be careful, Sid. Bye, guys.